get to be my age.
Well, tell me about it. I'll wake up and look at the clock and say 8 o'clock. Oh, okay, I should probably get rolling. Let me roll over and
Go back to sleep.
see if I might grab another, and then I'll look at the clock again, and it's 9:30 or 10 o'clock, and yeah, now it's time to get up. I say
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing about like rolling over and going back to sleep. It's another thing to actually get up, have what you think is 8 hours of sleep, take your son to school, come home, go, I'm feeling a little tired. I think I'll just lay down for a moment, go back to sleep.
Yeah,
Have like my morning nap.
that's true. That's
Yeah.
true. I basically just like grab my phone, see if I got any emails, see if any money's been deposited into my bank account, which is almost never true.
I remember growing up when you were in between movies and stuff, you kind of just be hanging around the house.
Yeah.
And I'd go up like, what do you got going on today? You go, I don't know. I think I'm going to start with my pre-nap and then work my way in a little bit later and do the full-blown thing.
Into the full nap, yeah.
I guess I was doing that a long time ago. So what's we got Jim Cameron on the line?
Right? I like when some people think that's like, you got Jim Cameron on your show, you won't even let him talk or show his face.
Is that right?
Yeah, I've seen a couple of those comments. That was early on.
So Jim Cameron didn't show up, so we're it's just the
not
three
yet,
of us again.
Not yet. I told you
and
to
we
call
had
him, see if
Spielberg
we can-
as a backup, and Spielberg's
we don't
we don't have
still
him
no
either.
good either.
Oh shit!
It's on the line.
Oh boy.
His avatar is showing up instead.
Caitlin said that he was talking to you about right before I walked in the door about subject or two, but one of the things that he what I thought we could talk about a little bit, and I think some people would like to hear, is my experiences with Billy Friedkin. And
we were kind of unsure of like what we were going to talk about again today. I got Jim on the line. He goes, "You got anything?" I go, "No." "You got anything?" He goes, "Oh, let's talk about that movie Sinners." Blah blah blah. But yeah, you go on with the Billy Friedkin stuff. I just wanted to once again tell everybody watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast on both YouTube and Spotify. It'll help our numbers out a lot. And once we get enough numbers, then maybe we really will get Spielberg on the line.
It might be a while, but
Jim Cameron, that's a stronger possibility.
Max Spielberg, his son, to come on. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, folks have been wanting me to talk a little bit about Billy Friedkin, who I fondly call Bully Friedkin. Jim, you've heard all of these stories, but you can just finish my sentence.
Not all of them, but a number. Yeah.
Finish my sentences for me. I met Billy right at a time when things were going really well for me, and and again, I really never thought like a career stamp. Should I do this for my career, or should I do? It was never really about my career. It was always just about working and working with somebody good. But around that time, I guess I was hot to a certain extent. I got an offer.
Had you done Abyss? You had done Abyss already, hadn't you?
I don't know. You can look up what year Rampage was.
But some people have wanted to hear about Rampage.
Yeah. Rampage.
You do have a nice thing on your Wikipedia page, which I might add, which is when you have enough credits, your filmography is in like a whole separate page.
Yeah.
So when you go to your Wikipedia page, like you have to go to a separate page for the Michael Biehn.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
The Michael Biehn filmography link? Yeah, that's cool.
But let me see. Rampage was the one right after Aliens, before The Abyss.
Okay, so there you go. So I must have been pretty hot, but I never really thought of it that way. But so I get a call from Ed, and Ed says, Billy Friedkin wants to offer you, and he's offered you this amount of money to do his next movie, and I back in the day, we didn't have telephones. We just couldn't go like, oh, Billy Friedkin, oh, here's his 30 credits.
Yeah.
But I did know that he had done The French Connection, and I did know that he had done Exorcist, and I was very excited about that offer. And the thing I will say about Billy is, Billy came in with money right off the top, like boom, here's what I'm offering, and it was good money, and they might have negotiated around a little bit about that, but it was good money right off the bat, and so I agreed to do it, and immediately at that point, I think we were about 2 months away from principal photography on that show, and I immediately, went and met Billy for lunch, and Billy is a fascinating human being, just an absolutely fascinating, smart, knowledgeable person to be around. I sit down for lunch at a restaurant he picked, and he's, let's get Michael this to eat. Let's get Michael, that to eat. And, he's already like the food connoisseur, like his wine. Yeah, let me see the wine. No. Yeah. No. Okay, oh yeah. This Michael, this wine is, and he would go on. And so between the food and the wine, I was already impressed. But Billy, of course, his knowledge
He was a man of many interests and across a wide field. I had no idea that he directed opera as
yeah. He definitely had done that kind of throughout, I think, his career. But he was very, very, very impressive. His knowledge of history and his knowledge of religion. Of course, he had done The Exorcist by then, but his knowledge of history and religion, and when I say history, I'm talking World War I, World War II, let alone his knowledge of movies and filmmaking and directors.
Oh, there's a terrific documentary about him called Friedkin Uncut. And at one point in the documentary, he's showing how he's got these original etchings of Sergei Eisenstein, the Russian filmmaker from 100 years ago, who was so influential in the development of film as an art.
Is he the guy that created the horse? Is that the horse that is the moving horse?
No.
Okay. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I know that. That's a crazy story. That was a photographer named Edward Muybridge, who was hired by Leland Stanford, who created the Stanford University, and it was on the campus of Stanford. Actually, it was a horse farm at that time, but Stanford was interested in the question of whether a horse at any point in gallop lifts all four legs off the ground at any one time. So he hired this crazy British photographer named Edward Muybridge to conduct a series of animals in motion. It was called Studies of horses, and he set a bunch of tripwires on. He set a bunch of cameras on a track and set up a bunch of tripwires, and then had the horse go racing by and setting off these tripwires. And when they took all these stills and kind of thumbed through them, they realized that a whole bunch of stills thumbed through like that creates a sensation of motion. So in a sense, you can say that motion pictures were created on the Stanford campus. I remember one time playing golf there and hitting a shot way the hell off the fairway and stumbling upon a plaque to Edward Muybridge for when that event occurred. It was in 1878 that those animals in motion photography occurred, and that's considered the the birth of motion pictures. Muybridge had started in 1872, but he had to kind of cut his studies a little bit short when he found out his wife was cheating on him, and he killed his wife's lover, and had to go to trial for that. So,
well, that's right around the years that the Earps were pimping out all their wives,
absolutely.
and that Wyatt was making a name for himself by being a really good pimp. Well, not even a good pimp. He was.
Well,
he got
worked at
caught
it long enough, though.
What did they call him? The bummer from.
The Peoria, the bummer from
the Peoria bummer. Is it the bummer?
The Peoria bummer. He was the Peoria bummer.
Yeah.
He was
What a piece of shit. What a piece of shit he was. The fact that for 40 years, well, for 100 years now, they've been making him out to be some sort of heroic character, and we'll do a podcast about it. But Jim and I have done.
Yeah, we will at some point, because we've done so much reading about him. But he lived to be close to 80 years old. He only wore a badge for about 6 years.
Yeah.
From 1876 to about 1882. He was done with law enforcement after the gunfight at the OK Corral. He never.
Well,
never
being
really
a pimp is a full-time job. So
well, I was going to say,
but
for most of that time, he toiled in the low ranks of the criminal world. He was either a pimp or a degenerate gambler.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what he did.
Degenerate gambler. I can go with that, but the whole idea that. The pimps and all the women he married were pimps, and even in the movie Tombstone, somebody says to Paxton, "Where'd you get her? Oh, she's beautiful. Where'd you get her? Same place everybody else in my family got them."
That's what Sam Elliott says. Probably the same place we got ours.
And they're still making money for us. So when we're out of work, smashing people over the back of the head with our guns.
Moonlight. A little moonlighting, yeah.
It's not a bad Elliott impression.
What's that?
It's not a bad Elliott impression you got going on.
Sam Elliott
Yeah.
impression? I just read yesterday that Sam's back on. What's the guy who's got all the westerns now? And
Taylor Sheridan.
Taylor Sheridan.
Yeah, he's doing the new Taylor Sheridan something or other. And Sam was pretty wonderful. Sam was about 10 years older, I think, than all of us, and so he didn't quite play in to that you're the bad guy, no, you're the bad guy thing that we all had going on. And we talked about that a little bit with Val, that they were all just scum that we never talked to. And Jim and I have done enough research, and I'm Johnny Ringo, I guess, and I'm biased, but we've done enough research, and once we get the podcast going, where we're able to bring people on who are living other places, we'll bring on some of the authors of the books that were written about Tombstone, and about how, well, in my opinion, that wasn't a gunfight. That was just murder. They went down, and the McClary brothers were completely in the wrong place at the wrong time. The right place at the wrong time,
you'll notice
the wrong place. Both.
The people, the Wyatt and his brothers killed in the gunfight at the OK Corral. It wasn't Johnny Ringo. It wasn't Curly Bill Brocious. It wasn't like the real cowboys. It was a couple of ranching families, local ranching families, the McClurys and the
Clanton.
Yeah, and the Clantons. Ike Clanton's brother.
Yeah.
So, and the town was really divided after it. I think you and I got interested in the subject of the real history of Tombstone when we discovered that there had been something close to a month-long trial in the immediate aftermath of the gunfight, in which Wyatt and Doc were in jail for about 2 weeks. And it wasn't a full-blown trial. It was a preliminary hearing, but it had a lot of the earmarks of a trial, the testimony and et cetera, et cetera. So that was a kind of a fascinating sidelight that we hadn't really realized. And that's what kind of sprung us into reading quite a bit about the subject. And I think it's true to say that most of the books that we've read were all written after the movie. The movie really spurred a whole bunch of new research into the whole subject of of Tombstone and Wyatt, the history of Wyatt, etc. There are a number of really good books that have been written since. So and it would be, and we talked to one of the authors of one of those books who is a professor of law at Northwestern Law School. He wrote a book called Murder in Tombstone that kind of focused on that month-long hearing. So there's a lot of research
Well,
out there, a lot of interesting, people to talk to about that subject.
yeah, and history's catching up to Wyatt Earp, and one of the interesting things about the would you call that an inquiry? It wasn't a trial, an inquiry. Would you do?
Yeah, it was a preliminary hearing.
Preliminary hearing, right? Was that it was just as unfair as the gunfight was. First of all, the gunfight, as you know, well, Jim, only one Clanton brother, and only Ike's brother and one of the McClary brothers had a pistol, and so it was really four.
Well, they were on their way out of town. I
know, and these guys brought the fight to them. They
went looking for them.
Yeah, they went looking for them, and they had four pistols and a shotgun.
They gave Doc a shotgun and told him they gave it to Doc and told him to hide it under his coat.
Yeah, and went down there, and it was basically 5 weapons against 2 because one of the McClary brothers couldn't get to his horse to get it, and it was just murder. It was just murder. There's no doubt about it in my mind.
It's pretty accurately depicted in the movie.
It was
a kind of an empty lot near an alley, and they were just taking their horses along this alleyway, and suddenly Wyatt and his brothers Morgan and Virgil and Doc
told them they wanted. It came down and said, "We want your guns." And give us your guns. They're not at a saloon, they're not at a bar, and there was a lawn.
They're on their way out of town.
They're on their way out of town, and they come down, and the McClary brothers
picked up their guns. They checked them in when they got in. When they came to town, they checked their guns in. And already picked them up to leave town.
Yeah, and Ike didn't have a gun on him, and so that whole situation. Seemed to be murder. And then when they went to the
reached more like an ambush than a gunfight.
Yeah, and when they went to the inquiry or the pretrial, from what I understand, that in my mind that was as unfair as the quote gunfight. When I just consider it murder, because in that preliminary hearing, the prosecution put on their case, and they were not the defense. Wait. The prosecutor. Go ahead, Jim. Because
Wyatt got to take the stand.
Wyatt
and give testimony, and by a weird quirk in Arizona law, he didn't have to be subject to cross-examination.
Right.
So he sat down with Wells Fargo, hired a couple of lawyers for him, and he sat down with those lawyers, and they crafted a really self-serving statement that he got to get on the stand and give this statement, and he didn't have to be subject to any cross-examination.
And none of them did. His brothers didn't, and Doc Holliday did, and they just all agreed with him. They just said, what Wyatt said.
Whatever Wyatt said.
If you're not allowed to be cross-examined in a trial, it's not really a trial. Now,
it's not.
When the prosecuting witnesses like Ike Clanton and Johnny Biehn and a number of other prosecuting witnesses got up to testify, they were allowed to be cross-examined.
They were. Ike testified, and he was rather savagely cross-examined, but not Wyatt.
And people talk about the fact that Ike Clanton was not truthful, and he was one of the reasons why why the trial went the way, or the preliminary hearing went the way that it did, is because his testimony didn't stand up that well, and it seemed like the defense was able to punch a lot of holes in his testimony. But you get good lawyers. You get good lawyers, and they can wrap words around your head that you think you're saying one thing,
especially with a fellow as kind of high strung as Ike.
Yeah,
and Stephen Lang's portrayal of him wasn't really too far off the mark.
Well, and it reminds me of the famous Clinton line when they're deposing him, and they get around to Monica Lewinsky, and they ask him a question, and he says, "That depends on what your definition of is." It's like those are lawyers, You put Ike Clanton up against people like that. Yeah, he's not probably gonna,
Only a lawyer could craft an answer like that,
yeah, we're going to get into some of that stuff because we've written about. And by the way, Jim, you remember when I said that we had a thing on the internet, and you said it was Truth in Black and White. That wasn't that was the name of the article that we wrote about that for Sonny, I think, for the script. And no, for the what's that cowboy magazine we wrote that article
True
for?
West.
True West. Yeah, that was I think that was
for
the
Bob
article.
Bose Bell. For BBB.
Yeah. So whatever it was, the name of like where all that stuff is now, maybe you've got copies of it, but
you can get it on True West website.
But it wasn't Truth in Black and White. The name of the website that we had that we were writing on, and back in the day, Kaylin, Jim, and I thought that we'd write all this stuff about Tombstone. People would be so effing interested in it, and
well, we would write these little vignettes about one character or another character. We were going to kind of build a website, and then the guy who was building the website with us died. So
and then you were going to do a podcast about it, and then the guy running the podcast turned out to be a little
and then got caught up in a Me Too scandal, and that killed the podcast idea. So but still, it's not work that went for naught. We'll get around to it someday and put together a pretty interesting. We had actually started with the idea some years ago of maybe doing a documentary about the real history of Tombstone,
which still hasn't been done, and nobody's to this day.
And
Ed Harris narrated something that was just bullshit recently. I love it. I mean, Ed's Ed, but come on, Ed.
Yeah, well, for sure. But I watched about 10 minutes of it and thought, this is just going to follow all the hagiography of Wyatt, so why bother with
the lionizing of Wyatt Earp?
The lionize, and as we were kind of looking into it, it seemed like, God, you could do this as an episode of Dateline. You got Wyatt involved in these couple of really entangled love triangles with his wife and
all his hookers,
and Josie, the character,
and Josie was a character that when he met her, Josie always she had she came from San Francisco, correct, Jim? She was from San Francisco,
yes.
And she left her family when she was like 14 or 15. She's like, this is not for me. I want to go out west. I want some adventure. And then from about 15 or 16 years old to about 24, 25, like there's no history of her. She doesn't talk about her history.
She was a working girl. She actually left at the age of about 14 because she said there was just too much excitement in the world for her to remain a child any longer.
I think that's in the movie, but yeah, go ahead.
So she joined an actor. She became an actress.
Oh, there you
And
go. One step. It's not too far from being an actress to doing
I
what
was
she
gonna
ended up
say,
doing. That's for sure.
and wouldn't you know, as soon as her with a touring company, and as soon as it got next door into Arizona, she wound up becoming we call them sex workers these days. So and
She didn't like talking about that
and sort of
though.
like she was one of a MAW, what they used to call a MAW, MAW, a model actress, whatever. And she, yeah, whatever you want to call it, or as the great screenwriter Ben Hecht said, a starlet is any woman in Hollywood over the age of 18 not actively employed in a brothel. So,
Yeah.
so she was actively employed in a brothel in Arizona for a couple of years, and then she wound up coming to Tucson on the arm of Johnny Biehn, the sheriff.
Johnny Bean really fell for her, right?
Yeah, he did. He brought her into Tucson as his fiance, and she wound up hooking up with Wyatt. So he had this.
Well, what happened is she hooked up with him in some whorehouse and with Johnny Bean, and then she decided that I guess this wasn't the right thing for her or something. She went back to San Francisco, right? And then Johnny Bean went and got her. And
her working name, her nom
Sadie,
Sadie, it was Sadie, yeah, and
backdoor Sadie,
Sadie, actually backdoor Sadie, and she and Wyatt actually wound up staying together for the rest of their lives.
I know.
And as long as they were together, he always called her Sadie, which she hated.
Tell
as soon as he died, she insisted people call her Josie.
Yeah. Not Sadie anymore.
No, but he always called her Sadie. Just a reminder.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we all know where you came from. Tell me that story too, Jim.
We all know. We've established what you are. We're just haggling over the
Come on, Sadie. Come on. Come on. Johnny Bean. We all know what's going on. Tell me that story about Wyatt Earp. Because first of all, I would just like to say the revenge ride. What do they call that thing? Is that
the vendetta ride? The vendetta ride.
The vendetta ride. The vendetta ride consisted. If you see the movie, it looks like they cleaned up the whole West. And I think in the movie they say, now Tombstone Tombstone was
a movie, and you can tell that's when they start tearing out pages of the screenplay, because you bring Robert Mitchum back, the narrator, and he says, no, Wyatt went after the cowboys, and you see a bunch of cowboys writing, stage left, and then they're writing stage right.
Well, but basically in the movie, they show them killing, a dozen probably, 15, 20 people being shot off their horses or shot or killed.
Wyatt, like on horseback, rides through a window and kills some guy in a barbershop, and he tracks down Ike and kills him, which never happened. And,
the whole vendetta ride in real life was 3 people, and they weren't really people of that much consequence, were they, Jim?
Curly Bill was one.
Well, Curly Bill was one. He
did wind up shooting Curly Bill pretty much as depicted in the movie. Found him at a watering hole, and they had a gunfight there, and he just basically walked out in the middle of the water and fired at Curly Bill and killed him. So they did get in that vendetta ride, but other than that, there was 2 other people, and they weren't of significant consequence.
Well,
it wasn't Ike.
Do you remember the name? No, it wasn't Ike. It was one guy had a Hispanic name. He was
Fernando or something like that. Yeah. And then
go ahead. Do you remember the other 2 kids? Anyway, the vendetta ride sounds like, and they make it at the end of the movie. And it's a movie. Johnny Ringo. Yeah. A lot of people don't understand that Johnny Ringo shot himself. Johnny Ringo committed suicide, and any other reading of that situation is fanciful. Fantasy?
Yeah, fanciful.
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 Thank you, Jim. That's why I like guys who went to Harvard.
Stanford.
Yeah, they can say all those words that I can't say. Anyway, we'll get into all the Wyatt Earp stuff at some point because he was such a piece of shit, and everybody just thinks he's so wonderful. But
It
like
would
I
be
said-
great to have, I don't know, one of those authors that you're talking about, or even a couple of them
there
on
are
the show.
a couple that one of them has already done Dateline. Wrote a book that Dateline was really interested in, and he wrote the best. I think Jeff Gwynne, and he wrote the best book about that whole event called The Last Gunfight. And I know he would be available to talk about it. And that professor from Northwestern, we could get him to talk about it. But it would be an interesting topic. There's a whole other issue of Wyatt trying to get the sheriff's job. He was trying to run the sheriff.
Of course he was.
And and take over the sheriff's job. And as part of that plan, he enlisted Ike Clanton to be a confidential informant. What could go wrong with that idea? Everything, it turns out.
Yeah.
So there's a whole fascinating backstory.
Tell me that story again about once Wyatt, basically they were done with him in Tombstone. They wanted him and his horror wives and all his horror friends
and he basically was going broke. He in the movie depicts him taking over a faro game from Billy Bob Thornton.
Yes.
Okay, that really happened. However, he only had the faro game for a couple of months because Doc got drunk and shot up the place, and the guy who owned the Oriental said, "Hey, you got to take your game out of here. I can't have you here anymore." So Wyatt was going broke. He'd actually been foreclosed upon and was living in a hotel at the time of the gunfight. The whole family had moved into a hotel because they'd lost their house. So his business enterprises were he was never a good businessman.
It was a
horrible businessman. The only financial lifeline he ever had was Wells Fargo.
And those bitches he was married to that were like ready to whore themselves out for him.
Exactly. Whatever income the missus could bring in.
Yes.
Whatever couple of bucks the old lady could
tell that story about him refereeing that fight. You remember
when he died, the first line in his obituary in the New York Times talked about the scandal involved with him refereeing a heavyweight championship fight in the early 1900s. It was he called the fight on a foul, and it was clearly a fixed fight. So that was what he was most known for at the time. He was trying to outlive the shame of this participating in a fixed heavyweight fight.
Okay, he was the referee, correct?
He was the referee. Yeah, he was the referee, and he called the fight on a foul, and it was it was clearly a fixed fight, very clearly, and he got a lot of scorn. And he basically had to go up to Alaska to get away from
and not make any money up there in the big gold rush, right?
Yeah, exactly. He went up. He was like he was one of those people who went up to Alaska during the gold rush and got nothing out of it.
Yeah.
He couldn't even run a whorehouse in Alaska and make money.
Well, he got caught running the whorehouse in Illinois that was out on the water, right? Didn't he run a really really horrible whorehouse? It was so bad that
they put one on a barge. Yeah,
it was on a barge, and the women were all complaining, and he ended up getting busted for that, right?
He thought if it was a floating whorehouse, they wouldn't get caught, but they did. So.
Of course, Wyatt and his his dreams. Boy, Kurt sure made him look good, didn't he? But Kurt Russell could play Hitler anyway. That's probably not politically correct. But one of the things that we talked about before, then we'll get on to Billy, back onto Billy. But one of the things we talked before about was them having to, take pages when that movie started falling apart, and they really started to say, well, we have a 140-page script here. We're just going to have to cut some of this stuff out. And according to Val, it was he and Kurt, thank you, Kurt, who decided what was going to stay in and what was going to be cut out. And this is something that I had mentioned to you, or mentioned to the audience before in one of the other podcasts, that when everything started getting torn out, one of the scenes that Johnny Ringo had, which is the scene. This is the scene that I thought, like, oh, I can't wait to get to play this scene. This is you know, so
Johnny's rising moment. Yeah.
Yes, and it's after Curly Bill is killed, and I have it on my phone now. It's after Curly Bill has been killed, and I guess a cowboy or two. This is in the movie, of course, but a cowboy or two. A cowboy comes back to tell Johnny Ringo what happened, and the cowboy says, Ringo says to him, he's just a man. And this cowboy says, well, you didn't see his face. And Ringo says, you see my face, don't you? Everybody get this through their heads. Wyatt Earp dies. I'm running the show now, and I'm telling you, Earp dies. His men too. They all die. Understand? For what they did to Curly Bill, we're going to ride him into the ground and slaughter him like rabbits. Because this is my time, children. This is my time to get woolly. And I never shot it. I never even shot it.
That's one of the reasons you took the part.
I know. I mean, everything worked out okay anyway, but like, I wonder if it was Val that cut. I wonder if it was Val who took a look at that and thought,
I mean, we've talked before about how odd it was that they decided to replace the director after he's been on the movie for 4 weeks already.
Yeah.
And then decide they're not going to use any of his footage. So that weekend after he was dismissed, and I guess the issue was up in the air as to whether the movie would even continue.
It was, and Kurt really did. Yeah,
Kurt really pulled it together, but it was Val and Kurt, and I believe Jim Jacks was in some of that, wasn't he?
Jim Jacks was the one who delivered me the news that this scene wasn't going to be in the movie. So
Michael, we're gonna be cutting some things. Like the rest of your role, the rest of your part. Yeah. The part where you all the stuff where you shined, Michael, that's coming out. All the reasons you signed it, but there was basically Johnny takes over the gang and has that great speech about it's time to get woolly, children. Listen up, children.
Yes.
It's a fun moment, you know. And then
would have been a fun moment.
Yeah.
It is no more. Anyway, getting back to Friedkin,
that script is available. People can look up that script quite easily.
Course.
Just Google Tombstone screenplay, and they can read all the stuff that kind of got cut out of it, because most of the cuts came from the last act of the movie, which is why it may seem a little choppy when the vendetta ride.
And I know that Kurt had said. I think it was in that same magazine that we did the article for. That
it was True West. Yeah,
True West. They interviewed him 15 years ago about it, and he said he sort of had to hollow out his character to make room.
Yeah, become an aura. He had to become an aura.
Yeah, and that
Wyatt was an aura.
Yeah, and that. What was your line about the bull and it depends on.
Yeah, on who's being gored here, whose ox is being gored, whether that you had, because he basically said I had to cut my roll down, and
I always remember this: the Cowboys got their asses handed to them during that cut, and so did the wives.
Cut down.
Yeah.
There wasn't a whole lot left for the Cowboys or the Earp wives to do either. There was a.
Kurt was so funny. There was one line in the fun, and a great leader, and like I said, he got that movie made. He held it together, and
it wouldn't have even been green light without him, and it wouldn't have held together when it damn near fell apart without him. So,
and he was a great Wyatt Earp, and he really is very interesting. I remember in our article, he's a great guy. He's a wonderful guy. Just don't mention rain machines.
if you look for it, it's hysterical, but you don't really notice it. But
I never hear anybody mention it. I never, it's been 30 years. People talk to me about Tombstone all the time, and Kurt will probably be pissed if he fucking heard I was outing the fucking. But I, give a shit.
Well, he was upset about it, like you said.
He was, dude. I was in dailies.
I've never seen
affable
guy.
Very affable, very fun, always whatever. Unflappable.
Yeah,
and then what happens is about his little brother, Bill Paxton, playing his younger brother, gets killed on the pool table, and Bill's got a pretty memorable death scene in that movie. And Wyatt Earp, is stunned and horrified,
raging,
and he's just raging, and he goes out, and it's raining out, and he just basically
thunder and lightning and rain is coming down,
screaming at the gods, for the injustice that's happening, and he gives this great performance. But if you pay attention to the shot, you'll see that only half of the street is being rained on. There wasn't enough money for rain machines to go down the street, so the rain stops about 10 yards behind him, and that truly. If I was him, I would have fucking made him reshoot. I would have been fucking livid too, because that was one of his great moments in that movie. Yeah. That speech was one of his great moments. And when you look at it, and it's, raining heavily on top of him, and then 10 feet away, it's completely dry.
Dry.
But that's
well, it's like,
that's
in your moment like that, you were out of focus.
I was out of focus, and I didn't even get to do it. We've decided to cut this one. Val persuaded Kurt to cut this one from Johnny Ringo. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened, but anyway, we'll talk more about Tombstone. What really happened in Tombstone.
I like how you keep going. We'll talk more about Tombstone later, and then you just go into it.
Well, then there was this one scene. Remember that one? Yeah, one line. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to what happened in real life, and
Kevin's screenplay was by far the most accurate of any of the movies or TV shows that have been done about Tombstone or Wyatt, and they've been making them for 100 years.
Well, it was by far the most accurate. Was also by far the what do you call it, Jim? When you you change it because it's a movie, whatever license.
Dramatic license.
Yeah, it took a lot of dramatic license with.
Definitely a lot of dramatic license for sure.
With Doc Holliday killing Johnny Ringo. Johnny Ringo was...
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Johnny Ringo was found. I've been to Johnny Ringo's grave, and I talked to the people that own the property, and I've spent time in their house, and Johnny Ringo was found sitting at the bottom of an oak tree. His horse wasn't around. He had taken his T-shirt off, and he had ripped his T-shirt and wrapped them around his feet, as if, his horse took off, and he was hammered, and he was somebody had seen him earlier in the day.
He didn't have any boots, he didn't have any boots.
No, his boots, what they think happened was that he was just so hammered that he just, wanted to rest, got off his horse, took his boots, and what they used to do is they used to take the boots and they used to put them on top of the horses, because all sorts of creatures
any snakes or scorpions
used to always get in, so they put him on the horse, and then he passed out, or he did whatever happened, and then something spooked his horse, and his horse wasn't there, so he didn't have any shoes. So he took his T-shirt off and wrapped it around his feet so he could walk further. And I think he finally said, fuck this shit, and killed himself.
Enough of this.
And there was a what do you call the guy who justifies the deaths? Coroner. There was a coroner that went out and said, well, yeah, he shot himself. That's what happened.
They actually did a coroner's inquest.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he killed himself.
Yeah. And
wasn't he known for suffering from like depression back then or something like that?
Yeah, well, we all are. I mean, who's not?
Especially back then.
I am.
Well, he didn't have any Xanax to reach for back then, All he had was alcohol, and that got him even more depressed.
Yeah. And Johnny Ringo never, from everything that Jim and I read about him, he never got into any trouble in Tombstone. He was never part of.
No.
He might have gone out. He might have gone out with. It was actually Ike Clanton's father that started the whole kind of cattle rustling sort of stuff, and that would have been a fun role to have.
Well, remember, Kevin's screenplay started with a scene of Ike's father.
It did,
and it was Ike's father who does the speech that that Powers Booth delivers now. My name is such and such. He says, I'm Curly Bill Brocious. I'm what you might call the father of the feast.
Yes.
In the screenplay, that's actually Ike's father, Newt Clanton, who's given that speech. And he's giving it to a couple of Mexican federales that they've captured.
Yes.
And then Johnny Ringo shoots the lieutenant of the federales. He doesn't shoot a priest. He shoots the lieutenant of the federales.
Well,
that's the way Kevin originally wrote the screenplay. And he was gonna have Robert Mitchum play Ike Clanton's father, and Mitchum was too sick to do that, so Mitchum wound up doing the narration. Yeah, too drunk. Okay. Well, sick. He had that brown bottle flu, and so they, and they wound up in the course of
the Irish flu.
The Irish flu for sure, and they wound up just sort of compressing. When it was clear that Mitchum wasn't going to shoot, they basically, just gave the scene to Powers.
Yeah. Well,
and instead of you shooting a federale lieutenant, you shoot a priest. So
I remember them coming to me and saying, "Oh, by the way, you're not shooting one of the federales, which somebody's got a weapon on them, and you're just priest is going to walk out of the door." And
federales know what they're in for. They know what
you got to shoot a priest. And I remember at the time thinking, well, that's not fuck that, but everything turned out well, I guess. And people are always like, Johnny Ringo was so oh, fucking how horrible.
Dude, wow.
What a fucking, torture. That's all he did. He does shoot the priest at the beginning, and whatever. He has some religious, he shoots the priest. But throughout the rest of the movie, he doesn't do anything except for twirl his gun and get drunk and
have people and stand around while people talk about him. Oh, there's Johnny Ringo, meanest pistolero in the West.
Well, people always have asked me about playing Johnny Ringo. One of the best compliments I ever got, the best compliment I ever got was I was at a event, and I was sitting, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around, and it was Richard Dreyfuss, and he didn't say he didn't say nothing. He said, how'd you do that? Where'd that come from? I need to know where that come from. How'd you do that? Where'd it come from? It's unbelievable. I can't. I'm like, hi, Richard. Nice to meet you. What are you talking about? And he said, Johnny Ringo. Where'd that come from? I went, yeah. And that was Richard Dreyfuss. So that was probably the best compliment that I've ever got. and he's a brilliant actor and somebody that I've always loved.
You always sort of identified with a remark he made early in his career about expecting at some point somebody to come along and tap him on the shoulder and say, "What are you doing here?"
Yeah, well,
You
that
don't
was
belong.
that was
Get outta
in,
here.
that was in the not Hollywood Reporter, in the Rolling Stone. He did a interview when he got nominated. Is Goodbye Girl? He got
Yeah,
he
it was Goodbye Girl.
won
Yeah.
the Academy Award for Goodbye Girl, and so he had to write up in the Rolling Stone magazine.
Rolling Stone interview. Yeah.
And he said in that magazine, his quote was, like you said, something along the lines is, I just keep waiting for somebody to come up and tap me on the shoulder and say, "Oh, Richard, we're sorry. We've made a really
Big
bad
mistake, big
mistake.
mistake."
It's really not you that we're talking, And I always thought that was kind of sweet. But he had a very interesting career. We talked a little bit about inserts when we had the actor.
Was it Mike?
What?
It's Veronica Cartwright.
Veronica Cartwright. We talked about inserts in the movie that he did with Veronica Cartwright, and anyway, I'd love to have him as a guest too. I asked him before I didn't even have a podcast a couple of years ago, and I ran into him after that. I'd seen him once or twice, and I asked him if he would do a podcast, and he was like, "Yeah, sure." They handed me a book that had something to do with the Constitution, something about kids not reading it properly, and that was a big cause for him. 10 years ago or so, the fact that nobody knew anything about the Constitution, the Congress, the Senate, and
we weren't teaching civics properly in high school, something along those lines.
To be perfectly honest with you, I have to call up Jim to find out the difference between a senator and a congressman. What are the three? There's three branches of government, Jim. What's the executive and the what are the
what's that other one? Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
there are two branches of Congress. Two. We need two.
So anyway, I'm working. I get this offer from Friedkin, and I'm starting to spend time with him. And what I realized very, very early on was that the script needed work, and he was very, very open with me. And I met with him at least, I want to say it could have been as many as 10 or 12 times I met with him, and we worked on his script, which actually I think the script was written by the guy who wrote the book. It was the screenplay was. I'm talking about Rampage. That was based on a book, and
the book is written by a fellow named William Wood.
I think William Wood might get credit for William Wood and somebody else. I don't think Billy put his name on. The thing about Billy Friedkin is, if he could have ever been a writer, if he was a writer, Jim Cameron or like if he would have just been, there would have been no stopping that guy.
Very likely. Very likely.
He has a screenplay by credit on Wikipedia. I mean, it says it's based on the book, but it says Rampage directed by and screenplay by William Friedkin.
Screenplay by Billy Friedkin?
Yes, that's what it says on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen.
I think he did take a credit on that. A screen credit.
Credit, but the only credit
screenplay by and then the next one just says based on Rampage, the 1985 novel by William P. Wood.
Oh, I thought that they had worked together on this screenplay, and you know how that goes in Hollywood.
Well,
if you notice, most of his movies, he didn't write. He didn't write any of his movies.
He did work with Wood. He knew Wood, and Wood had approached him about doing the movie based on his book, and so he talked to Wood. He talked to. It's roughly based on a case that Wood handled. Wood was a prosecuting attorney for Sacramento, and Billy talked to got all the court records, all the trial records, etc. So he'd really immersed himself in talking to Wood, dealing with Wood, and researching the case, the story. An interesting factoid is that Wood, who was a prosecuting attorney in Sacramento, also prosecuted Dorothea Puente, that woman that Michael Rosenbaum
yeah.
is doing the miniseries about. The
Yeah.
the woman who killed the serial
tenants.
killer
Yeah.
old lady.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He wrote a book. He wrote a book about her called The Bone Garden.
Well,
William Wood wrote.
yeah, and you're right about all that, and it's a small world, I guess.
It is, yeah, exactly.
When it comes to like not mass, but like horrible killers, and it's a small world. Writers who are covered.
What has had plenty of material because he's written 13 books so far.
Yeah,
largely based on his cases. So.
Well. It was evident to me, and I think it was evident to Billy at that time, that his screenplay was not quite up to snuff, and he was more than willing to listen to my ideas, and almost everything that I talked to him about had to do with the fact that I was playing the prosecuting attorney in that movie, and would hesitate to say, but I think that I probably wrote half of my own dialogue in that movie. I could be wrong, but to give you an example, I know you know this, Jim, but Kaylin, you probably don't know. Like, there is a device that I use throughout the movie, which is a tape recorder, and you'll see me in the movie.
One of those little handheld micro cassette recorders.
Yeah. And I would use that device, not only, basically we could give exposition. We could talk about the movie. We could talk about the characters with me talking into this device. And my dad was an attorney. And my dad used to walk around with a tape recorder all the time. And he would, walk into the other room, or you'd hear him sort of mumbling in the other room. So instead of jotting things down, he used a tape recorder, and he would play stuff back. And that was wholly my idea. But anyway,
and
that
Friedkin
was the relation.
Friedkin embraced it, yeah.
Yeah, he did embrace it. He embraced all my ideas.
It.
He was great. He was absolutely fantastic. And at one point, I was talking to L'Amato about like how wonderful he was, and L'Amato was like, "Well, I don't know, Michael, he's got a little bit of a reputation."
Wait till you get on the set.
Well, no, he didn't say that. He said, like he's got a reputation. Like, Ed, no, this guy's fantastic. He's unbelievable. He's great. So anyway, time goes by, and we're getting the screenplay into shape, or at least my character. I didn't have anything to do with any of the other characters, but mostly when it came to my stuff, I came up with a lot of that stuff, and he was very inviting. I went up to his house. I was at his house a number of times. Jim, first of all, he was married to some very interesting women. Do you know the French actress he was married to originally?
Yeah, Jean Moreau.
Right.
He was married to Jean Moreau. He was married to an American actress named Leslie Ann Down.
Right.
I'd forgotten this. He was married to a woman who was a prominent LA news personality.
That's who he was married to when I did the job. Kelly. Yeah. What was Lang? What was her name?
Kelly Lang.
Kelly Lang.
She was. I think she was on KNBC for years, the NBC affiliate in LA. She was on that station for years.
And then when he got into a situation where nobody would finance his movies anymore, he married
a studio chief. He married Sherry Lansing.
And got a bunch of movies financed. Sure.
I remember
Go ahead.
Ron Shelton wrote a movie called Blue Chips about basketball.
That he directed.
I was going to say, and Ron wanted
Nick
to
Nolte.
direct it, he was so furious that Sherry Lansing gave the movie to her husband, Billy Friedkin, to direct and not let Ron direct it. He was really furious about that. But Blue Chips was directed by Billy Friedkin.
And Nick Nolte. And by the way,
Nick Nolte and Shaq.
That had Shaq O'Neal when he was about 22 in it.
Real young.
I haven't seen that, but I think that's a reasonably good movie. And what I would just like to say this about Sherry Lansing. She is, and around me has always been one of the nicest, caring, wonderful people. You know, she's the head of a studio. Oh, Michael, you're so, you know, I saw this and it's so wonderful, and gee, so happy to have you. And I just thought she was, I don't know what she was doing with Friedkin, you know, but anyway. So yeah, I was up at his house all the time, and he had a nice, really great house, of course, and so I had that sort of relationship with him before we went up to, it wasn't Fresno, it was, I'll think of the town that we shot it in.
Stockton.
Stockton.
It was Stockton,
yeah, we shot it in Stockton. And I was married to Kaylin's mother at the time, and we hadn't been married very long. And we were very excited, young newlyweds, and I can remember driving up to Stockton in my Jeep. I had a Jeep at the time, and us going up there, and everybody was staying in a hotel, and Gina and I, Kaylin's mother, got an apartment that was catty corner on the same street corner, like catty corner to the hotel. I mean, you could basically throw a stone and hit the hotel. I never remember anybody ever saying to me, you have to stay in the hotel. Billy wants everybody in the hotel. I never even remember that. That's all I remember is the fact that we had a house that you could walk out we had a little house that I rented. You could walk out the front door, cross the street, and you were on the property where everybody in the production was staying. And I don't remember anybody ever saying anything about it. And at one point, I remember I was in the wardrobe department and going through some wardrobe stuff. And somebody rushed in and said, Billy wants to see you. He's really fucking pissed. And I was like, what? Billy wants to see me and he's pissed? Like in my mind, I'm like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, right? So
he hadn't been pissed at you before for anything.
No.
You'd never heard anybody say, "Hey, Billy wants to talk to you and he's really pissed."
No, and I'd spent 30 hours
days
with him, 40 hours. He was nothing but charming. And by the way, he's such a charming individual and so smart and so funny and, like I said, so knowledgeable about movies and just a joy.
That really comes across in the documentary about him too, just how worldly he was.
Yeah, and just such a joy to be around. And I walk in his office and, hey, Billy, you want to see me? And he was sitting behind his desk, and I think he had his first AD on that job that was there. And Billy just fucking lit into me and started fucking screaming at me about the fact that I was not in the hotel. And I don't know if he knew where I was, but he went on a 2 or 3 minute screaming, throwing papers down, irate, about how the fact that, when he did The Exorcist, this happened and that happened, and we need to know where everybody is at all times, and the fact that and he just went off on me. And like, this is a guy, that I'd spent all this time with. I'm like, what? What? And I just, after a minute or two of this, him screaming at me, I'd never even seen him anything like that before. I've never even seen him like the least bit upset. I walk out. I just said, like, in my mind, I guess, like, fuck this shit. And I walked out the door. And I remember walking out another door, which took me outside of the hotel, which was the production office. And I'm walking probably back towards my house, and Billy chases me and chased me as I was walking. And, you know, I kind of had a feeling he was behind me, and he grabbed me by my shoulder. And I instinctively turned around and threw my hands up, which knocked his hands off my shoulder. And then we were kind of standing face to face, and he was so pissed, man. I pushed him away from me because I thought he was going to hit me. So I pushed him away from me far enough that he couldn't take a swing at me. And then it was my fucking turn to tell him that I didn't give a shit about his movie, that nobody talks to me like that. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with you. I spent all this time working on your fucking script. And if you think that you're going to talk to me like that, I don't need your movie. I quit. I fucking quit. Fuck you. I quit. And, you know, like, you're a piece of shit. You know, that I was like, that was I didn't like, fuck you. You know, it's just like if somebody at a grocery store, that's not a good example, but somebody that you think you know. And I was fucking pissed.
And it was so out of character from what you'd
listen, you know, people talk to me, hey, I heard Jim Cameron's really hard to... Jim, no, he's not. Jim Cameron would never never even come close to pulling anything like this. It was just like outrageous, just outrageous. So I told him to go fuck himself. I didn't need to do his movie. I didn't want to do his movie, and told him to go cast somebody else. As we were standing outside of the hotel, and I walked off, and I went.
Were there
back.
other like cast members or stuff?
No. There weren't any cast members around, but the crew, somebody from the crew had come to me and said, Billy's really pissed off. Right. So, and I walked out of the production office and probably walked by a few people, and I'm sure they saw Billy frothing at the mouth, like, you know, following me out of it, and I'm not sure. But it was just me and him out there, and I just told him to fuck off. I didn't need his movie. I didn't want to do his movie anymore. So I went back to my house, which was 100 yards away, and told your mother like what had happened. I mean, I was very, very, very upset. I was very, very upset. I put a lot of time and effort into this, and I thought Billy was one thing, and you know, like it was like Jekyll and Hyde. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Like I just wasn't that experienced, and I guess I was 30 years old.
Over what seems like a trivial matter.
Very trivial.
You know, you'd done a number of movies up to that point and never been compelled to stay in the same hotel as other members of the cast and crew. You'd never experienced a situation like before, had you?
Well, you know, usually when I would do a movie, the production would want to put you up someplace, and you would say yes, and that was fine. And like I said, I don't remember them ever saying, "Oh, Billy wants everybody in the hotel." I just remember us getting a place, and you know, for all I know, Gina set it up with somebody on the production. You know, I didn't. It was just a little house, and I had a car. And if somebody needed to get a hold of me, they could have walked from the production office over to my house, and it would have taken them about 4 minutes to do that. And that's why the whole thing was just so absurd. But even if it had been something weightier, even if it had been something where, you know, I had talked to the press or I'd said something. there's a way of dealing with people. Listen, Michael, I got to talk to you. This is unacceptable behavior, and I just want you to know if you're going to work on my. But wasn't that? It wasn't that. It was, do you understand? Don't you when we were doing the exercise, this happened, that happened. Listen, you can't, that's what I got from Billy that day. And
that ranting,
he was just, he lost his fucking mind. So I went back to, and I talked to Gene, and I was a little shaken up and said, like, well, it doesn't look like we're going to be doing this movie. And she's like, what? And, I explained to her what happened. I called Ed Lamato, my agent, and who had a little bit more of clout in those days. I told him what happened, and he said, "Okay, well, this is terrible. Let me make some telephone calls." And
let me deal with it.
I don't really remember, but nobody ever told me that I wasn't fired, and Ed basically must have called me back and said, well, from what I understand, you're still working on it if you want to be working on it. And I want you to be working on it, because by that time, you sign contracts, and if you try to pull out of a movie a week before they go into production, that's what happened to Alec Baldwin's first wife. Remember how terrible that was when she pulled out of that movie? Kelly, was it Kelly? No, I could be wrong.
Are you talking about Kim Basinger?
Kim Basinger, yeah. Kim Basinger. Yeah, I think she pulled out of something about a week before. But anyway, right. I was pretty shooken up about the whole thing, and but anyway, we started working on that movie, and Billy Friedkin he knew not to fuck with me. After that happened, he never ever again said anything to me. He never fucked with me again. But he fucked with everybody on that crew. Anybody who worked on that.
Well, that's it.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, that's kind of what I remember you saying, that he was a real tyrant on the set, that when you were working with him.
Tyrant is such an understatement, Jim. He was evil. He was fucking evil to people.
Well, it was a real Jekyll and Hyde change in his demeanor, wasn't it? From when you were working with him on the script in the early days to when you actually got on the set, he was a monster.
He was a monster.
From what I understand.
He was a fucking monster. And what he had on that set, he didn't have any Roy Scheiders, or he did, he had a very young cast. You can look up the cast for me. The guy who plays the
Nick Campbell,
Nick Campbell, who plays the defense attorney, was a great actor from Canada, and I can remember him, like watching a take and like having like some script or whatever in his hand, Friedkin throwing the script down. I don't need this goddamn TV acting. This is bullshit. Like that kind of stuff was the norm on his movie. He also had a very young camera crew. And, he'd come in and say, I want this and I want that. And the camera crew would, then he'd go away. And then I don't know where he went, into his trailer to fucking who knows what. And then he'd come back on the set and he'd look and he would say, tear it all down. Tear it down. This is bullshit. Tear it all down. Meaning the whole lighting system, every light that they had put up for, take 2 hours basically to light the area that we were shooting. They had to start from scratch again. Tear it all down. Like this is, and so everybody was really, really quite young in it. And there was one guy, and tell me
Cast?
What cast member who plays the killer?
I can just. What's the killer's name?
I will when I hear it.
So Alex MacArthur.
Yes, Alex MacArthur. Alex MacArthur played the killer in it. Okay. Looking back on it, great fucking role. Great fucking role. And for some reason, he took Alex MacArthur under his like Alex MacArthur was the guy that could do nothing wrong. Just absolutely do nothing wrong. And they would be together, and there seemed to be some sort of erotic. There was a
erotic, really.
I don't know what
undercurrent.
No, I know him. He's been married since we did that movie, and Friedkin obviously is what he is. But it was some weird relationship, and he did not treat Alex MacArthur.
Yeah.
He did not treat Alex. Alex was always like his best friend. And he was always walking around with his hand around his shoulders and stuff like that. And, but everybody else, he just was a fucking, like a tyrant and screaming all the time and yelling and throwing stuff. And, if I had been my age now, or even if I had been 40 or 35 instead of 30, I would not have let him get away or treat people the way that he treated other people on that set, because it was really horrific. Harsh is, and it's such an understatement, man. He was everybody show up on the set, and like he hadn't shown up yet, and they always had this thing when he would get to the set, over the microphones you'd hear, "The Eagle has landed." Like, I don't know what the fuck that, okay, all right, he's here.
That was from the moon shot.
Yeah, well, that
the Eagle has landed.
Okay, well, that's how important, I guess, his AD thought he was. And,
man on the moon, important. Yeah,
and so, it was a pretty horrendous. Everybody was on pins and needles, and the only. I've heard Billy say, I think I've heard Billy say in the past, I think I've heard him say, there were times that I was, my behavior on the set was totally uncalled for. Okay. I think that Billy has said that before, and I regret my behavior. If there was any movie that happened on, it was this movie, because there was nobody there to tell him to go fuck himself, and I should not have let him treat the people on that set the way that he treated people. And I can have Kaylin look up her name. She had a small role in it.
Deborah Van Valkenburg.
Well, Deborah Van Valkenburg played my wife. Okay, he didn't seem to have any affinity for the women in that movie, but there was another actress on that show who had a smaller role, and she might have been one of the victims' relatives or something like that. And
is it Grace Zabriskie?
No, Grace Zabriskie.
Grace Zabriskie.
Yeah. Grace is a wonderful actress, and
she's been in a number of good movies.
I'm just looking through the other cast. Brenda Lilly.
Maybe somebody like Brenda Lilly. It is somebody that I don't remember very well, but she was a relatively young girl, and he couldn't get a reaction out of her, so he slapped her to get to get her crying and being upset because, he slapped her, which is fuck that. You don't need to do that. And I've heard Billy talk about the fact that in The Exorcist, when the guy goes out the window, who's the lead in the movie, and tumbles down the stairs, and he's laying there dead, and there's a priest giving him his last rites, that he wasn't getting what he wanted from the priest, so he slapped the actor who played the priest, Well, you know what, Billy? Yeah, go fuck yourself. Somebody should just kick the shit out of you. That's
He wouldn't get away with that now.
no, he wouldn't get away with any of that now. And I listen. The French Connection is one of the. And listen, his movie. The French Connection is, like you said, Jim. It's probably the best buddy cop movie that's ever been made.
Arguably, he made back-to-back the two best movies in their respective genres. French Connection is probably the best cops and robbers.
The Exorcist
police
is the best.
And The Exorcist is probably the best horror movie ever made. Arguably, at the beginning of his career, he made the two best movies in their respective genres. So
I've heard Billy doing. I've watched Billy's interviews now over the years. Now that you can just pull them up, and he's a little bit. And I guess we all are, but he's a little self-serving when he talks about the French Connection, and he talks about. Who's the star of it? The guy who just died?
Gene Hackman.
Roy Scheider.
No, Gene Hackman. He talks about Gene Hackman. He talks about how Gene Hackman really didn't want to go there and go where, I'm not sure. Didn't want to play a racist, and I don't really remember him being a racist. He goes into that bar and he's slapping people around and stuff, but he kind of takes credit for pushing Gene Hackman to a place that he wouldn't have been before. The Exorcist is I loved The Exorcist when I loved it a lot less after he was using that as a reason. I'll tell you, you know who could really tell you a lot of stories about him and probably wouldn't, but she told me years ago she would after he died, is the little girl,
Linda Blair.
Linda Blair.
Yeah.
I'll bet you Linda Blair if you.
Oh, I bet she would.
Yeah. But and she was just a kid on that show. Another movie. And he made some great movies. He did a movie called The Sorcerer, which, Jim, you and I were talking the other day about whether we saw it together at Grauman's or whether we saw it individually at Grauman's. But that movie just blew me away. Just absolutely blew me away. And it had so much production value, and it was enormous. So well done.
You know who the cinematographer on that movie was?
Dick Bush.
Yeah.
I think I read that. Yeah, I think I read that Dick Bush was the cinematographer, and we talked about that. You know what? I was a kid when I was doing The Fan, and maybe the White Sox wasn't a good idea, but I just didn't like Dick Bush very much. But the fact that he did The Sorcerer, I heard that. I've learned that recently, and he would have had to work hard. Well, I got so much more. Do you want to? Are we doing two of these?
Yeah, we're doing two of them.
Okay.
Because you're going out of town, and so we're not going to be recording next week. So we're going to do two.
Okay.
Of them. I planned for us.
I've got a lot more on Friedkin.
Yeah, we'll just
pick it up.
We'll pick it up next week. I mean, I was planning for us to do an hour. We're almost at an hour 30 anyway. So we'll just pick it up next week with Billy Friedkin and whatever else we're going to.
Next week, or we're done? We're done for today?
We're done for today.
Okay.
And then next week's episode will be just a continuation, more Billy Friedkin.
I thought you wanted to get two today.
We are going to get two.
Out of this?
No, we're going to do another one. I'm going to stop this, and then we're going to do another one.
Okay. All right. Well, to be continued.
Yes.
All right, Jim, I guess you stay on the line, and now are we doing the other one?
Well, I'm going to stop the recording, and then I'm going to start another one.
Yeah. Okay, well, they'll give me a chance to stretch my legs. I'll be right back, Jim.